After reaching the Western Conference Finals and heading into the offseason with the impending free agency of Jalen Brunson, a big offseason was ahead for the Mavs. As we now know, Jalen Brunson has left Dallas, but yet the Mavericks still had a busy and brilliant offseason and have put themselves in position to be title contenders next season. Let's talk about it. The Dallas Mavericks started off the offseason with a trade earlier than anyone expected, but with a move that fits the Mavericks' needs very well. The Mavericks' weakest position last year, without a doubt, was at center. Their guard play was great, from the superstar Luka Doncic to now New York Knicks Jalen Brunson, who we'll talk more on later, to trade deadline acquisition Spencer Dinwiddie, and for half of the season, Tim Hardaway Jr. The wing play of the Mavs fit their roles around Luka well, with Dorian Finney-Smith being a very good 3-and-D wing who signed a very good value extension, and Reggie Bullock proving to be a very good 3-and-D wing in his own right who hit some very timely shots in the playoffs. However, at center, they were working with Dwight Powell and Maxi Kleber, which are certainly the worst players when compared to the aforementioned ones. They can both be valuable and serve a role within a rotation, but ultimately they have their limitations and are not the ideal options as a starting center for a roster with title contending aspirations. While we will discuss the other center addition momentarily, let's first discuss the impact Christian Wood can have on this team. Certainly he is not the defensive center addition that many were discussing, as Rudy Gobert was a rumored target for the Mavs to make them one of the best defensive teams in the NBA alongside an explosive offense led by Luka. But Christian Wood ended up being acquired for significantly less assets than Rudy Gobert did, with the Timberwolves giving up 2 prospects, 3 rotational players, and 4 picks, while the Mavericks only gave up 4 non-rotational players and a late first. And while Christian Wood may not provide the elite level defense that Rudy Gobert does, he does have the potential to unlock a completely new dimension of the Mavericks offense. Christian Wood is not the first borderline all-star caliber big man to play alongside Luka, but there is very good reason to believe that Christian Wood will fit very well alongside Doncic, unlike Porzingis did. Porzingis was a ball-dominant player, especially compared to Wood. He needed the ball in his hands much more. He needed his own isolation touches and post touches. Sure, he could be a good 3-point shooter who can provide some spacing around Luka, but Porzingis also wanted and demanded his isolation touches in the paint, and at times has been one of the most post-up heavy players in the NBA, while not being one of the best post scorers in the NBA, and these post-ups take away from the natural system and flow of the Dallas offense and from Luka's creation. These post-ups instead relied on Porzingis scoring and nothing else, taking away from the potential greater impact of Luka having the ball in his hands for his own scoring or for the creation of others. With Christian Wood, he isn't a big who needs his isolation scoring touches on the block that regularly. He can get you a bucket from time to time when needed to take off some of the pressure, but he is not a ball stopper. He is not a disruption to the offensive flow of any team, and certainly not to the Mavericks. And if anything, I would argue he will enhance the offensive flow of this offense and fits in perfectly to what Luka's game is and what this Mavericks offense is. Firstly, Christian Wood is great in the pick and roll, or even at times in a pick and pop. And from Luka Doncic's perspective, Christian Wood is an absurd upgrade over Dwight Powell. Irrespective of any other impact that has on the rest of the offense, the pure pick and roll and pick and pop game that Luka Doncic and Christian Wood are about to have is about to be amongst the best, if not the best, in the NBA. Secondly, Christian Wood is a very good cutter. He can recognize when the defense is not focusing on him and where the gaps are in the defense and gets to those spots very well. And while being in a system with Luka Doncic to create space, take attention away from Christian Wood, and to be able to get the ball to Wood in those open spaces, this just makes the cutting ability of Wood that much more valuable and impactful than it has ever been in his career. And when compared to Dwight Powell, or even better to the best center on last year's team with regards to 3-point shooting, Maxi Kleber, you're not losing any quality in 3-point shooting either. If anything, compared to last year's numbers, you're improving, as Christian Wood has become a very good and efficient 3-point shooter at relatively high volume, whether it be from catch-and-shoot threes while spacing on the perimeter, or from a pick and pop, something Luka will certainly incorporate into their offense. And all of that action, increased quality in the pick and roll, the pick and pop, Christian Wood's cuts, and his 3-point shooting, in turn will open up more opportunities within the Mavericks offense, allowing for more open threes for others and more space for Luka to operate, as the role partner now commands much more respect defensively. The trade already made a massive impact on the Mavs roster and put them in a great space heading into next season. But they then went out and made their center rotation one of the best in the NBA, and with the combination of both additions, addressed every single need they had at the center position. The one thing that left to be desired after the addition of Christian Wood was the improvement of the Mavericks' defense and rebounding at the center position. And well, then they addressed that and more while acquiring one of the best free agent centers of the summer in Javale McGee. McGee was signed to a great value contract and locked up for the next few seasons after being one of, if not the best backup center in the league last year. At this point in time, we all know the impact of McGee. He is a good rim protector, a solid rebounder, competes hard on both ends of the floor for loose balls, and brings good size while still being some level of a vertical threat at the rim from the pick and roll. That's all fairly simple. McGee doesn't do anything fancy or flashy, but he makes the hustle plays and the winning plays that become very valuable come the playoffs. Now, where the McGee signing becomes that much more interesting is with the potentially enhanced lineup flexibility the Mavericks now have with him on the roster. Naturally, you would expect McGee to be the backup center for this team behind Christian Wood, and it's quite possible that that ends up being the case. But it doesn't have to be. McGee could also start at center, leading to a bigger and arguably more defensively sound lineup, and giving more wing depth off of the bench, with Reggie Bullock likely moving there, which isn't a bad thing either considering the Mavs' weakest point of depth is on the wing. But the flexibility doesn't end there. It allows for the Mavericks to go offense-defense with McGee and Wood late in games. It allows Maxi Kleber to exclusively play at the 4 where his defensive concerns are not as apparent and he can continue to be a good floor spacer. It also allows Dwight Powell to play at the 4 depending on the matchups on any given night where he could be more suitably fit, but didn't have the opportunity to do so in last year's rotation due to the lack of centers. The value of JaVale McGee on a title-contending team is significant. There's a reason he has been a regular rotational piece of 3 championship-winning teams. He's not the sole reason they won, obviously, but he has an impact. He can contribute to winning basketball, and he brings that championship pedigree alongside his winning impact with his rim protection and rebounding to this Mavericks roster in what now makes one of the best center rotations in the NBA. But enough about the center additions. Not everything about the Mavericks was perfect and beneficial to the Mavericks' success. So let's talk about the departure of Jalen Brunson. After a breakout season and some good playoff performances, to put it lightly, the Knicks heavily pursued Jalen Brunson. And they got him. And they got what is arguably their best starting point guard of the last decade or two. But what does it mean for the Mavericks? Well, certainly it's a loss. Jalen Brunson is a very good guard, who was a secondary playmaker and shot creator, something that is not overly common on this Mavericks team outside of Luka, making his skill set very valuable. However, it isn't as much of a loss as it would have been 8 months ago, primarily due to the acquisition of Spencer Dinwiddie. Brunson is better than Dinwiddie, certainly, but Dinwiddie can fill in the large majority of the role that Jalen Brunson had last year. Whether that role is fulfilled off of the bench or in the starting lineup remains to be seen, but it is clear that Dinwiddie can fill most of the role as a secondary creator and playmaker alongside Luka, while providing a good amount of scoring punch off of the bench or with the bench unit. Another key reason why the loss of Jalen Brunson can be internally replaced is Tim Hardaway Jr. Seems to be a forgotten man, but he will be returning from injury, meaning the Mavericks are not losing a secondary shot creator and shot maker, but simply Tim Hardaway Jr. will be entering the rotation and Jalen Brunson is gone to the Knicks. Which is a downgrade, certainly, but it's not something that rings the fire alarm. It's not something that causes immediate concern that says the Mavericks immediately now cannot be title contenders. It's a slight downgrade, but you have guys, unlike you would have 12 months ago, that can supplement the loss. The Mavericks will still have 2 solid secondary shot creators around Luka and 1 other good playmaker in Dinwiddie. So in an ideal world, would you still like to have Brunson? Yeah, of course you would. But his replacements are already on the roster without a significant decline in quality. and given it seemed destined headed into free agency that he was going to be signing with the Knicks, it certainly could have been much worse if you're a Mavericks fan, and in general, it was a very successful offseason in Dallas. So how good are they? However you feel about the loss of Jalen Brunson, the Mavericks are a better team headed into the 2022-23 season with the additions of Javale McGee and Christian Wood. With that in mind, last year's Mavericks team got to a Western Conference Finals, and they improved. So in my opinion, there is no doubt with another year of improvement from Luka, the significant improvement of the center position, and the return of Tim Hardaway Jr., that the Mavericks will be a title contender for next season. So the better question might be, where do they stand in the Western Conference? Well, the Warriors are likely the team to beat again next season as defending champions, but after that, is there truly anyone clearly a step above the Mavericks? The Grizzlies are once again very good, but certainly not a tier above the Mavericks. The Suns lost to the Mavericks last season in the playoffs, so it seems very discrediting to the Mavs if you consider the Suns a tier above them. The Timberwolves are a fun, exciting team and have added Rudy Gobert, but when they become title contenders is dependent on the development of Anthony Edwards, and that year might not be next season. The Nuggets are getting MPJ and Jamal Murray back from injury, but their health and team defense is still in question. And so that only really leaves the Clippers as the only other team outside of the Warriors that could potentially have the chance to be clearly a tier above the Mavericks. If they can stay healthy, specifically Kawhi Leonard and Paul George, then they could be amongst the Warriors tier of top-tier contenders in the West. But that remains to be seen. And outside of that, I don't think there's anyone that is significantly better than the Mavericks. So the point being is that the Mavericks are amongst the best in the West, and should have a chance in any game they go into this season and any series they enter in the 2023 playoffs. The Mavericks may have lost Jalen Brunson this summer, but still had one of the best off seasons in the NBA and are set to be title contenders next season.